Hi, everyone. Welcome to the PSAC British Columbia presentation, Practical Home Office Ergonomics. I want to start by acknowledging that we're on unceded territory of the Musqueam people, where I live and work, and we're all participating from different traditional territories across British Columbia and possibly some of our members in the north. My name is Sharon Barber. I'm the PSAC Regional Representative for Health and Safety based in the Vancouver Regional Office, and I'm going to be playing the role of moderator today. Our Regional Executive Vice President for British Columbia, Jamie Mills, couldn't be here today, but I know he would like me to welcome you and thank you for participating and thank you for the work that you continue to do through these difficult times on behalf of Canadians. Those joining by phone are in listen mode only. If your question to bcwebinar@psac-afpc.com. Before we move through, so to participate, you can open and close your control panel using the orange arrow right here. To join audio, you would choose mic and speakers to use the voice over internet, or choose the telephone and dial in using the information provided. You'll be able to submit questions and comments using the questions panel on your dashboard. And we will have a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. This presentation is being recorded and will be shared with you and with our members across the province. You have some handouts available under the handouts tab, and you can raise your hand using the hand icon if you have an issue that requires attention. Our presenter today is Dan Robinson. Dan is a Canadian certified professional ergonomist and a practicing kinesiologist with over 30 years of ergonomics experience and a doctorate in kinesiology from Simon Fraser University. He's worked as president of Robinson Ergonomics from his home office for almost 20 years, so he's uniquely equipped to provide this presentation on home office ergonomics for us. His professional focus is on enhancing productivity, usability, and safety and health. In addition, Dan teaches evidence-based, human-centered approaches to design at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. He is a past president and a fellow of the Association of Canadian Ergonomists, and he's a leader and a member of several committees developing international standards on ergonomics. Thank you so much, Dan, for joining us today. We are excited to hear your presentation.
Okay, excellent. There, I think we're on.
I can hear you.
Excellent. Okay. So thank you for the introduction, and thank you to Sharon and Deanna for setting this up today. I'm going to talk about office ergonomics, and I've spent a number of years talking about office ergonomics in different scenarios. The whole objective is really to try to set yourself up to be comfortable and productive, and to ideally try to prevent musculoskeletal injuries. And I am going to talk about musculoskeletal injuries a little bit because I believe you need to understand what you're trying to prevent if you actually are trying to intelligently prevent it. The home office has some unique challenges that may be a little bit different than your typical well-equipped office, but the overall objectives are the same. So I'm going to talk to those objectives, but I'm also going to have, I'm going to share a few tips for relatively low-cost approaches that we can use to try and set up at home. Now, the bottom right part of your screen here, if you remember nothing else from this, This is your objective. Try and set yourself up so that your monitor is basically top of the monitor at eye height, your keyboard and mouse at elbow height, and your feet are well supported. Posturally, what we're looking for is 90 degrees at the knees, 90 degrees at the hips, 90 degrees at the elbow, and everything else is nice and straight and in alignment. So the MSI, or musculoskeletal injury, and I'm going to say MSI from now on when I talk about this because it's just easier to say than musculoskeletal injury. We're talking about soft tissue disorders. They're also called musculoskeletal disorders, repetitive strain injuries, activity-related soft tissue disorders. There are a bunch of acronyms that are all used to represent something similar, and they're not really that different. They're all the same. When it comes to computer-based work, what we're usually dealing with are gradual onset MSI. It's not something where you've done any one thing in the moment that's caused the injury. It's what you do over time. And we're mostly concerned with the upper extremities, the back, and the neck. Now, there was a poll on the first slide. I'm not sure, Deanna, if we have that one live or not. Basically asking how many people, there we go, how many people are experiencing any kind of symptoms in your work. So if that's a yes or no, or I'm not sure kind of a question, but I am curious to know how many people listening have some form of symptom at the moment that they're dealing with. So that poll is open. Now that the injuries that we're trying to prevent, oh, no, you're still on the poll. I'll give you a few seconds to fill that in. Ah, well, that's good to see. The majority of people have no symptoms of MSI. That's fabulous. Oh no, the majority of people do have, 77% have some form of symptom they think might be either caused or made worse by computer work. Now that the issue with this is it really doesn't matter whether it's caused or aggravated by work. It's equally a problem. And most of these symptoms, like I say, they don't happen in any one instant for any one thing that you've done. They're degenerative MSI, and basically what that says is a gradual onset that happen over time. There's often a point in time where you become more aware of it, the symptoms become more severe because it's progressive. You may not be aware of what's happening early. So the other message here is early symptom recognition is very, very important. So ideally, we're in stage 0. We have no symptoms, we're healthy, we're happy, we're smiling all the time. Most of us, and looks like roughly 77% of the people listening in today, are somewhere between stage 1 and stage 2. And so in stage 1, you have some symptoms, some aching, some fatigue. You still wouldn't say you're injured. You get a bit of a rest, you have a night to recover or a weekend to recover, and you come back and you feel refreshed. But if we keep doing what we're doing and we don't change anything at that stage, we don't pay attention to those aches and those minor aches and the fatigue, low-level symptoms, it gets a little worse. It means our symptoms may start to bother us now, not just when we're working, but when we're doing other activities. It's quite common for a lot of these symptoms to interrupt sleep, to start to interfere with our choices outside of work. And typically what's happening here is the symptoms are starting to get worse. Pain's a little worse. We might have some numbness, some tingling in our fingers. So it is progressing. Most of us hopefully are in stage 1, stage 2. Unfortunately, some of us will get to stage 3 if we continue to do what we're doing and we don't try to change anything. Stage 3 it's a profound injury. This is usually where people say, I can't work, I can't continue, and I need medical assistance. Now, we're no longer in prevention if we're at stage 3. By the time we get to stage 3, we are now into treatment and maybe modified duties, maybe unable to work. Where you can have the most impact is stage 1, stage 2, and even stage 0 as full-blown progression. Even if you don't have symptoms, set yourself up well. If you notice those early symptoms, aching, fatigue, it can even be tension in your shoulders, tension in your neck, that's a sign you need to change something. Take a look at how you're set up, take a look at how you work. If those symptoms get worse or if they persist and what you're doing isn't helping, ask for help. There are people out there who are quite willing to assist you, provide you with ideas. They may have seen it before. Some of the symptoms may be fear factor symptoms as well that are worth getting a medical opinion on and getting a proper diagnosis. Tendinitis or tendinopathy. I'm going to talk through a few of these, not because I want you to learn to self-diagnose, but because this helps to understand what the signs and symptoms are. It also helps to understand what the risk factors are. So tendinitis is, various tendinopathy, they tend to be things that aggravate the tendons. Of course, we're talking about tendinitis. Symptoms tend to be where the injury is. So if it's a wrist or a hand tendinitis, you will have pain and symptoms, possibly swelling at the wrist, in the hand. If it's at the elbow, that's where you will feel it first. So the symptoms are localized. Now tendons, I'm going to talk a little bit about what tendons do and why is this even relevant for work with a computer. Well, if you're typing or you're using your mouse, you're moving your fingers. Every time we move our fingers, that's actually controlled by muscles that are up in your forearm, up in the top. So for those watching the slides, it's the pink area up here closer to your elbow. Most of the muscles we use to type with and to rotate the mouse with and to click buttons are up close to your elbow. And the way that they move your fingers is they're attached by long ropey tendons to the tips of your fingers and along your hand. There's some on the back of your hand, there's some on the palm of your hand, and some laterally on your thumb. Different names for the types of tendinitis that you might experience. De Quervain syndrome, for example, is the thumb. Epicondylitis, or tennis or golfer's elbow, is tendons where these muscles anchor up at the elbow. But the ones that tend to be most susceptible to computer work are the wrist, through the wrist and the forearm and into the hand. Now, why do these happen? If you imagine wiggling your fingers back and forth and typing, every time your fingers move, those tendons slide back and forth. They actually move, they slide back and forth. The muscle in your forearm shortens, the tendon gets pulled up and it slides. So if you picture these, I said they're ropey structures. They actually are a lot like a rope. They have a lot of fibers in them, long fibers. And if you were to take a rope and slide it back and forth across a surface, there would be friction. And eventually you're going to get some fraying on the rope and you get some wear and some tear. And that really is the first risk factor. It's the repetition. Simply moving your fingers repetitively, moving your wrist repetitively is going to cause friction, and it has the potential to cause injury. Now, that'll happen even faster if we take a rope, imagine a rope, and you bend it around the corner of something, bend it across the edge of a table, for example, and slide it back and forth. We now have a contact point against the rope against the corner, and where that contact pressure is where you're more likely to get fraying. So you can now predict where along the rope you're likely to be injured. That is essentially the same as an awkward posture. If you bend your wrist, so rather than a nice straight wrist, if it's bent upwards or bent downwards, you're asking that tendon to slide around a corner and you're creating a pressure point that is likely to increase the damage to the tendon. So the first two risk factors are repetition, the second is awkward posture. What we're going to look at in configuring your workstation is trying to eliminate the awkward postures where possible so that the repetition is happening in a nice, smooth, straight line. Now, the third factor that tends to influence the risk to the tendons is force. Forceful exertion. And you may be saying, this is an office, I'm using a mouse, I'm using keyboards, where is the force? Surprisingly, a lot of people have a death grip on their mouse, and it tends to be with the fingertip, your thumb, and your pinky gripping the side of the mouse. So if you look at the mouse that I'm gripping right now, it tends to be gripped kind of like this, finger and thumb. If you relax the finger and thumb and just move it, you're likely to have low force. However, 2 pounds force, fingertip pressure, is enough to be considered high. And a lot of us grip the mouse a lot harder than we need to. It's also prolonged gripping. If you don't let go and you don't allow the hand to relax, that prolonged sustained grip is an issue. So 4 things we're looking at there: repetition, awkward postures, anything that involves forceful grip, forceful pinch grip, forceful exertion, and anything where that awkward posture or that grip is sustained. Now, the second thing, you've probably heard about carpal tunnel syndrome. For years, that's been considered the scourge of computer work. Everybody's getting carpal tunnel syndrome, their wrists hurt. It's actually less common than that, but it is something that occurs related to repetitive use of the hand in awkward wrist postures. Carpal tunnel syndrome is one possible nerve entrapment syndrome. The others that you might have heard of, thoracic outlet syndrome, which is actually happening up at the shoulder, cubital tunnel, the elbow, and you can also, if anybody's experienced sciatica, pain, numbness down the legs, into the buttocks, those kinds of things, there's actually nothing wrong with your leg. Those tend to be low back and higher up. So the symptoms that we deal with in nerve entrapment, they tend to originate at the wrist, at the elbow, at the shoulder here, with the nerve plexus where it comes out just under the collarbone, or up at the neck. The symptoms are experienced, they're what are called referred symptoms. So they're downstream somewhere from where the irritation is. And the most common is actually numbness. If we're dealing with the arm, we're dealing with numbness, tingling, loss of strength in the hand. You might actually just simply notice you're dropping things. You don't have the strength and the feedback in your fingers you normally have. And so you experience things in your fingertips up here. We tend to start looking at our hand and our wrist right away and say, what am I doing with my hand or my wrist that is causing problems? What we don't know with nerve entrapment is where that originates. So unless you actually get tested, we don't know that it's your wrist. So you need to look at the full chain. What am I doing with my hand and my wrist posture? What am I doing with my elbow posture? What am I doing with my shoulder? And what am I doing with my neck? We need to look at that full chain. And the risk factors are exactly the same. As you move and you bend, the nerve actually stretches, and it tends to stretch the most around corners. And one of the other things that tends to cause problems for nerves is contact stress. If we pinch that nerve, so for example, if your wrist comes up around the corner of the desk and you've got an edge that you're leaning on, nerves get very irritated by being pinched for long periods of time. So similar kinds of risk factors as tendinitis, add on that contact stress is something that tends to irritate nerves. Headaches at work. Now this is one that a lot of people tend to experience and often don't think of as an MSI. And it probably won't show up as an MSI. However, a large percentage of headaches, really there's nothing going on in your head. It's more like those referred symptoms with nerve entrapment. So looking at this diagram, we have muscle trigger points. The X's on the diagram tends to be in the shoulder, close to the shoulder blade, or in the neck, where those muscles, if we sustain awkward postures and ask them to tighten up for long periods of time, we have muscle trigger points that will, essentially what they'll do is they'll start to say, okay, I'm fatiguing, and they'll knot up, and they'll turn into those little golf balls that you want to release and that are hard to release. You may not feel it though in the muscle. That tension, that achy fatigue in the muscle might actually not be what you experience, or it may not be, if you're not paying attention to it, may not be the last thing you experience. What happens if those tend to trigger is that they move up into the zones that are shaded here. So the base of the skull, the top of the shoulder. Some people will get symptoms in the very top of the shoulder and assume they have a shoulder injury, and it's actually coming from a little muscle down by your shoulder blade, down lower. It can move up through your neck, into your temples, into your jaw. And actually nothing's happening in those locations. It's quite aggravating and it can make it very hard to continue working, but the cause is actually the postures that you are adopting with your head and with your arms and shoulders. And the things that tend to be risk factors, particularly in a home office where we are more likely to use laptops, are sustained awkward postures of the neck. Laptops tend to have a monitor that's far too low, so we tend to end up tilting forward and looking low, slouching forward, having our head looking into the monitor. And if our mouse and our keyboard are too far away, now our arms are forward and our head is forward, and those muscles are having to hold that up. So if you're getting headaches at work, one of the first things you can look at is whether or not you can adjust that posture so that your head is directly above your shoulders, looking straight ahead, and your shoulders are relaxed, elbows directly below the shoulders. The other thing that can affect this is people that work with paper documents, and they tend to be put off to one side. So now we're turning our head and we're looking down for long periods of time. Well, those muscles that hold your head in that position are also likely to fatigue. So what can we do about this? Now there's another poll we'll put up here. I'm curious, we have 77, 78% of people who are experiencing some symptoms. I'm curious about whether you feel you're able to set up your home office to manage that risk with your current equipment. So with what you have at your disposal in your home office, do you believe that you might be able to set up your current office equipment so that you can manage that risk and prevent it? We'll give you a few seconds to respond to that poll. And I don't know is fair game. That may be why some of you are actually here on the call. Okay, so we have a mix. We've got, yeah, fair game. 31% are saying not too sure. We have more than half of you are saying, nope, I don't think I do. I need something else. And 17% are going, yeah, I think I got this. All right, well, I'm going to ask you that question again after we've gone through a few options and see whether or not, hopefully we can bring that 52 number down somewhat. When we're looking at controlling MSI, there are a couple of different ways to look at this. So your control strategies, there's two levels. One, we can call these engineering, and two, administrative. The engineering is really the physical things. Do you have the equipment you need and the space you need, and have you actually set it up and configured to fit? So it's the physical aspects. The administrative piece is more behavioral. That's about how you do what you do. Do you tend to plunk yourself down, head down, hand on the keyboard and mouse, and work for 8 or 10 or 12 hours straight without ever getting up until you finally get starving hungry and have to go get something? Or do you put breaks in your day? Do you mix it up? So how we do what we do is equally as important as how we set it up. A simpler way to think about it in this 3-step approach. The first is, what can you do with what you currently have? Have you set it up? Have you used it in the most effective way? The second is, okay, I've tried that. I can't get there. What additional equipment do I need to get to where I want to be for the physical setup? So 1 and 2 are really about the engineering controls. The third thing is, so what could I do differently? Is there something I can change in my behavior, something I can change in the way that I work that would make a difference? I'm going to talk through a few of those as we go. This next slide is, again, I mentioned this at the introduction. This next slide is really the most important part of the whole thing. And again, these are your targets. So I'm going to walk through this again. Posture. You're aiming for nice upright posture. You want your head above your shoulders. You don't want to be turning looking to one side. Monitor over to the corner of a desk is something that will lead to neck problems and shoulder problems, and eventually you'll twist in. So we want your monitor right in front of you. Ideally, we want the top of the monitor at eye height, this line between the eyes and the top of the monitor. We want it arm's length away, so you don't even need a tape measure for this. I mean, the technical is between 50 and 70 centimeters away is ideal. You can use your arm's length, roughly arm's length, so your fingertips just touch, or maybe a tiny bit further. If you poke that screen before your arm gets out, it's too close. You want the middle of the screen, the center. Usually you can use the logo on your screen as a goal. Take the middle letter in the logo and line that up with your nose. That's ideal. And the other piece, I know it's really lovely to look out a window while you're working, but if you have a window behind your monitor, or if you have a window immediately behind you, in all likelihood, you've got a very bright background, and that's not productive. It's very difficult on your eyes to constantly adapt between the brightness outside and the lower level of light on your monitor. So 90 degrees to the window is an orientation of your computer monitor that tends to work very well for both brightness, contrast brightness, and also for eliminating glare with bright. You tend to get sunlight coming through the window and shining on your screen, or shining behind your screen. Both of those can be a problem for your eyes. Now, lighting as a goal, as an ideal goal, we don't want the background immediately behind your computer to be any darker or any lighter than twice the monitor brightness. So working in a dark cave with all the lights turned off and your monitor on is extremely hard on your eyes. Working in super bright daylight with your monitor on is also hard on your eyes. So those are things you don't want to be doing for long periods of time, and you want to pay attention to the lighting in the room. Diffuse, even light is your preferred setup. Keyboard and mouse, we're going to target elbow height, nice relaxed shoulders, your elbows close to being immediately below your shoulders and close to your body, if not right there. Not squeezed in tight, but relaxed. Your feet, in an absolute ideal world, we'd have your feet flat on the floor. If you have to be sitting a little bit higher to get your elbows up to keyboard and mouse height, then at least having something under your feet so they're supported. The little star base, that 5-star base underneath your chair, that's not really intended to be a foot support. So if your feet are tucked under the chair on that, go find something that you can put in front of your chair to raise up and support your feet. Now, I know some people do prefer to stand and work, or want to mix up sitting and standing, and there was some popular press articles out that said sitting is the new smoking and it's going to kill us all. That's actually not an accurate reflection of what the research said. What the research says is a sedentary lifestyle is evil, and prolonged sitting is part of a sedentary lifestyle, so get up and move. But standing is one way to vary your posture. Standing all day creates just as many problems as sitting all day. Standing and sitting in front of a computer are both static postures. You're not moving. However, your targets, elbow height for your keyboard and mouse, monitor height for your eye height for your monitor, those are the same if you're standing. Doesn't matter whether you're standing or sitting, those are both the goals. So now let's talk, that's the generic goal, and it doesn't matter whether you're at a home office or at an office. That's how you want to try to set up. Now, let's talk about a few of the things that tend to come up in a home office. So if you're at work, you've got a nice electric height adjustable desk that goes up and goes down, and you put it where you want it, and you've got this expensive ergonomic chair that goes up and goes down and everything adjusts. Perfect. Set yourself up. At home, we don't always have that. In fact, it's rare that you have all of the adjustments. So the two scenarios that tend to come up is, you're using your kitchen table and a kitchen chair, or you've got a desk that's fixed height and a chair that maybe doesn't adjust. A couple of things come up. So I'm going to talk about the simple, cheap solutions. If your chair is too low for the keyboard and mouse, you can't get yourself up high enough on your chair so that your elbows are at keyboard and mouse height. Well, you have a couple of different ways to go. One is to try to raise yourself in the chair. Now, if you have a chair that goes up and down, raise your chair. Bring your chair up so that you actually align your elbows with desk height. If you have a fixed height chair, or if your chair doesn't go high enough, simply take a bath towel, fold it and put it on your chair, add a cushion to your chair, use something to try to elevate that chair. If you put that on the back half of the chair so it's under your hips, you can raise yourself up higher so your hips are higher than your knees, and that actually helps with low back as well. Another strategy you can use, as in the picture, rather than going out and spending a few $100s on a keyboard tray and trying to install that yourself on your home desk, simply using, and actually in the picture, it's an IKEA shelf. A shelf or a plank that sits on your lap, put your keyboard and your mouse on that plank. That's going to be pretty close to your target for elbow height. Most of us are dimensioned so that if we're sitting at a reasonable height, that plank is going to sit quite reasonably for us. If your chair is too high for foot support, so you've just raised yourself up on a cushion to align yourself with your keyboard and mouse on the desk, and now your feet are dangling, or your toes are touching the ground, but your heels don't get down there. If you can lower your work surface, drop your work surface so that you can lower your chair and your feet are on the ground. But of course, if that's what you're doing, you've got full control anyway. If you can't, stay high in terms of your position on the chair, but find something else to put under your feet. So you've raised yourself in your chair to align your elbows with keyboard and mouse. Put something under your feet in front of your chair so you have support. And that could be a footrest. You can go and get a footrest from Staples or Grand & Toy, or order one from Amazon. Doesn't matter where you get it. They're not super expensive, but a box, some books. I've even seen people using an old briefcase. You're working from a home office and that old leather briefcase from the 70s is still around. Just throw that under your feet. Now the monitor, is your top of the monitor at eye height? And I will come back, I'll talk about laptops because laptops are evil for this. It's very hard to have your keyboard at elbow height and your monitor at eye height. In fact, it's almost impossible to do both using just those. I'm going to assume initially that you have a separate monitor. So if you have a separate monitor and you want to adjust to eye height and it's too low, the first thing you should do is take a look at the stand on the monitor. It's actually surprising how many monitors these days come with a height adjustable stand. It's just they come out of the box, they're locked in the low position, and it stays there. So first of all, check the stand, see if you can raise it. If you can, raise it up. Now, if you don't have a monitor riser built into your stand or don't have a monitor riser you can adjust, or if your stand doesn't adjust high enough to adjust the top of your monitor to eye height, throw some books underneath it, throw reams of photocopy paper, a box, use that IKEA shelf or another IKEA shelf, put it under. You just use something to get that monitor up high enough so that you're looking straight ahead and you can sit back. Now that's assuming you have either uncorrected vision or you're using single prescription lens glasses. A lot of people wear progressives or bifocals. If you do, your target zone is going to be lower. If the top of your monitor is at eye height, the reading zone in your glasses is at the bottom section of your glasses. And so you're going to end up tilting your head backwards to align the reading zone with your monitor. That awkward neck posture is going to create problems. So your monitor is going to need to be lower. And your ideal target is having roughly the middle of the screen height-wise in focus when your head is neutral and you're looking downward through the reading portion of your glasses. So it's going to take some trial and error. Everybody's glasses are a little bit different, but this guy with the funky blue glasses in the slide, your reading is actually going to be looking downward more so than looking straight ahead. So technique to test this is put your glasses on, close your eyes, and get your head centered in a nice neutral position in front of your monitor. Put something on your monitor you can read, and then open your eyes and look. Now just tilt your eyes down to read. Where is it in focus in your glasses? Don't tilt your head. If you have to tilt your head, it's too high. Adjust that height until you've got it in a zone that you can read the middle of the screen very well. Now some people I've seen will go out and they'll buy, the cheap readers at the local drugstore, and they'll throw those on and try to read your screen. Reading lenses are not made for arm's length reading. They're made for reading a book or text that is paper copy, less than arm's length and very close and held up right in front of your face. So reading glasses are not great for reading your monitor. Reference documents, if you are reading reference documents, which is probably the only reason to put those readers on, one of the things you can do to make this a little easier for you, target putting that reading material between your keyboard and your monitor, not off to the side, but in front of your keyboard or in front of your monitor and behind your keyboard. So as in the pictures here at the bottom, the paper is between the keyboard and the monitor. That allows you to look up and down without turning your head and your neck, and it allows you to do most of that reading by tilting your eyes down rather than getting into an awkward neck posture. Angling it up towards you is another advantage, and there's two ways to make this happen. One is you can spend $100, go buy an inline document holder like the one pictured. There's a couple of my favorite models, one from 3M, one from ViewRite, listed on screen. But you can also do the 10-cent solution. Grab a binder or a clipboard or a shelf, anything that's got some structure to it that will support the paper, and prop it up. Prop it up between your keyboard and your monitor so that the top of your paper, the top of your reference material, is right at the bottom of monitor height, and the bottom is then at your screen. This is easier to read. It's easier to look at, and if you're someone who actually uses a pen, ticks things off, highlights as you go, just make sure that that's stable enough and put in place so that it's not going to move. Now, 2 monitors. I'll tell you right now, most people using 2 monitors don't really need 2 monitors. And so if you're using 2, I'm going to ask you, think about how you use your monitors. Think about why you use 2 monitors. If you really do need 2 because you need to keep email open on one in case something pops up while you're working on documents or something else, great. but put that as a reference monitor off to one side. So the setup of using one monitor as your primary and one monitor as a secondary reference monitor that you don't spend all the time looking at is preferable to trying to equally use right and a left monitor. The scenario of using two monitors equally means that neither monitor is in the ideal zone. Both of them are going to be in a slightly awkward position for reading. So your ideal scenario, if two monitors works for you, is going to be having your primary centered as if it's your only monitor. So your nose, the B key on your keyboard, the middle of the monitor, all lined up. And that's where you're going to do most of your work. Put your active window there. If you're going to write a long email, even if email resides on the secondary monitor, grab that window and drag it over to your primary monitor. Anything you're going to work on or look at for a long period of time should reside straight in front of you. Now, the secondary monitor then should be on the mouse side. Now, most people use the mouse on the right, but if you happen to be someone who uses the mouse on the left, put the monitor on the left side. Put it on the side that you're going to naturally lean slightly towards for the mouse anyway, and angle it towards you so that as you move further out in viewing and reading on the screen, you have the same focal distance. Your eyes don't have to try to adjust to the distance you're reading from. If you angle that just perfectly, it's the same reading distance on the right side of that screen as it is on the left. And close the gap. No gap between the monitors. If you have a 3-inch gap or a 4-inch gap between the monitors, that's totally wasted space and you have to look past that to use it. So close the gap, tighten them up as tight as you can, and get both monitors at the same height. Now, if you really do equally use both, or if you've got giant spreadsheets that need two monitors to spread across, what you want to do is center your nose equally between the two. So nose, the B key on your center of your keyboard, and then the zone immediately between the two monitors. And angle both monitors towards you equally. So you're looking probably at about a 30-degree angle, the left monitor, 30-degree angle of the right monitor. If you can, stick with the first option. One monitor is the primary and aim for 25% or less activity on your secondary monitor. So let's get to the laptop thing. Most people working from home have a laptop. A lot of people will have a laptop that they will take to the office, plug into a docking station there, and they've got a peripheral monitor, peripheral keyboard and mouse, and it's just like they're using a standard computer. But when you come home, you may not be set up that way. If you're going to work from home for any length of time, I would strongly suggest you get at least a peripheral keyboard and mouse. This allows you to use your laptop as your monitor and to elevate that, put that up on something. In the picture here, again, I'm using that IKEA shelf and I've just put a couple of square vases underneath it that get it up as high as I need it. So the top of that laptop monitor is aligned with my eye height. But it now allows that to happen while I've got a keyboard and a mouse at desk height and down lower. And even better, if you can go with a peripheral monitor, laptop monitors are smaller. They tend to be smaller than full separate monitors, which means your font is smaller. It means it's going to be harder to read. You are always going to be better off with a larger size monitor. Go get a 21, 22, 24-inch monitor and use that. Trying to purely work on a laptop for hours and hours for days on end is pure evil. You are going to experience neck and shoulder problems. It's not possible to hit your targets. So invest yourself in a keyboard and a mouse that's peripheral. There are a lot of options now that are Bluetooth or USB, so that it's just a plug and go, or it's simply a turn them on and they work. You don't have any wires. It's very quick and easy. It's tempting. You've gone and got a peripheral monitor and you got your laptop. Well, now let's use the laptop as a secondary monitor or as a second monitor. If you're doing that, treat your laptop as your reference monitor. Put it off to the right and use the peripheral, use the separate monitor as your primary. So again, you're going to need to raise your laptop, and in the case on the left here, I'm simply using the couple of vases to lift it. You could use books, you could use a box, use whatever, but try to align the top of the laptop and the top of the monitor so that they're close. If you're using two monitors with the laptop or two monitors simply as two monitors, make sure you set up your display as well so that your mouse moves between the two in the direction they move, in the direction that you're actually moving. Otherwise, you move your mouse to the right of the primary monitor and it jumps to somewhere else on your other monitor. So you want that mouse to flow evenly between the two, and that's simply a setting in your control panel. Another option, if you're going to be reading, just looking at things, but you're really going to be working mainly on that primary monitor, your laptop is a reference monitor, you can treat it like an inline document holder. Put it just below, just in front of, between your keyboard and your primary monitor, and tilt that monitor screen back on your laptop so that it lines up and allows you to see the lower, that lower menu bar. This can be quite effective as well. And you can also set the displays up so that your computer knows that you've got a top monitor, that's your primary, and when you move your cursor down, it will go straight down. So you can orient the relative position of your monitors in your display settings. Now phones, okay, actually a lot of people these days don't even have landlines, but if you do, and you tend to sit on your landline at home, very few people have a headset that works on their landline, and you really don't want to spend a lot of time with the phone receiver tucked between your ear and your shoulder while you've got your hands on your keyboard and mouse. That's, again, like a laptop, that's pure evil from an ergonomic perspective. So if you're going to be on long calls, you ideally want a headset or a speakerphone, but you can also ask why the long call. Can I put it down in some way? Can we do this as an email? Is there a way to change this so I don't need to make it as long a phone call as it is? If you're going to be on long calls, one of the beautiful things about a cell phone is that the earbuds with a microphone are actually relatively cheap compared to a headset for your landline. So using your cell phone for those longer calls and putting your earbuds and a headset in is actually a wise decision. It can make things easier. You can put your phone down, now your hands free, and you can participate in the conversation. It's also tempting, particularly in a home office, to just, you get up in the morning, you're still in your PJs, and you pick up your phone and you start answering emails, and the next thing you know, you've been doing that for 2 hours on your phone. That's not the wisest use of your phone, and it's not the best thing you can do. We tend to hold our phones in front of us and look down at it, which is an awkward posture for your neck, and it actually does create some significant neck problems. So better than that, if you're going to be using your phone for any length of time, if you're going to read something on it, simple solution, but it takes effort, is to prop your elbow right close to your body and bring your phone up part way so that you can just drop your eyes and look at it. You don't have to hold it straight in front of your face, but if you prop your elbow up, lift your phone up slightly instead of holding it in tight to your body, it's in a much more favorable position for reading. Use your phone for short texts and emails only. If you're going to type a long thing or a full document, switch to your computer. Go somewhere that's actually made for doing that. Phones are not. I've actually had a student in the past that went through an entire semester, wrote technical reports and long essays on a cell phone, and he paid for it. Not ideal, but there are things you can do. And plan your time. The other piece of this, and I talked about this, is partly about how you do what you do. Now, when we go to work, we tend not to, get up from bed, scratch our head, grab a cup of coffee, and climb on the bus or drive to work in our pajamas. We tend to actually have a morning routine. If you're going to work from home with the same kind of a pattern. It's important to establish some separation between work and non-work life, and that work-life balance, part of that is about developing a routine that allows you to have kind of normal work routine, normal life routine, and they're different. They're going to be more aligned and more intertwined at a home office than they will in a completely separate office, but there are some things you can do. So first thing to think about is your physical work location. Can you assign yourself a place where you're going to set your work up, where your laptop shelf and your peripheral keyboard and mouse live? Even if you're working at a kitchen table, maybe one half of the table becomes your workstation and the other half is where you eat. but they're separate. Try to establish a physical work location that is separate from your living location, if possible. The other thing is, and this is actually really important in terms of burnout, in terms of your sense of work-life balance, it is very easy in a home office to accidentally work for 12 or 14 hours straight and just not realize you've done it because your head's down, you got things to do. Whereas at the office, everybody picks up and leaves and the lights turn off and people turn around and say, what are you doing? It's time to go home. So try to set up a time routine, set some hours where you can interact with others who are also working either from home or in the workplace. But set up some regular hours. If your job is normally 9 to 5, you might want to try to work 9 to 5. Try to keep normal work hours. That's partly for you. It's also partly in terms of your ability to communicate with others who will be in the office at the same time. Personal preparation. Get yourself ready to work. And this is part of your morning routine. If you're going to start work at 8 or 9 o'clock, what would you normally do before you go to work? You're probably going to get up, you might have a shower, maybe you exercise, you'll have a meal, you will change your clothes. Early on with the COVID-19 work from home and the physical distancing, there were an awful lot of people joking about changing from their night pajamas to their day pajamas and going to work in your day pajamas. Sure, you can do that, but at least change into your day pajamas. Have something where you change your clothes and you get ready for work and you actually feel like you are in work mode. You might even want to say, hey, work day's over. I'm changing out of my work clothes and putting something on. That's part of that separation, and it does help mentally. It helps get you ready to work. The other piece, and this is how you do what you do. This is more important than saying, hey, I need a sit, stand, station. I'm going to alternate between sitting and standing. This is about making sure you actually move once an hour. Harder to do in a home office where nobody comes knocking at your desk, nobody comes to see you. Although if you're working in a home that has children and others around, or a dog or a cat or something that comes and interrupts you, that may happen anyway. But if you're working in some isolation, you're working alone, you are going to need to have some prompt so that once an hour, at least once an hour, you get up and move. Go walk to the kitchen, go walk to the washroom, go walk to a window and look outside. But change your position and walk. Move for 1 or 2 minutes and then come back and work. That's not lost time. That's not unproductive time. What the research shows is that actually makes the next hour more productive. Over the course of a day, you will get more done with those 1 2 minute breaks every hour than you will if you don't. And that's part about your personal maintenance. Make sure that you actually stop and take hydration breaks, nutrition breaks through the day. Don't try and work the whole day without putting some more water or coffee in your cup without getting something to eat. You need to stay hydrated, need to stay nutrient positive. That's establishing separation between work and life. You also need to maintain connection, and it can be trickier to maintain connection with your colleagues and with your workplace. Schedule a regular contact or check-in. Now, if you're the supervisor, schedule it with the people who you're supervising. If you're the employee, make sure you schedule a check-in with your supervisor or with other coworkers. Schedule that to be regularly. Ideally, try to make that routine. Maybe it's every Monday morning, maybe it's every Wednesday afternoon, but try to establish some contact routine, and even if it's just a check-in to say, hey, how are you doing? Is everything on track? Making it something like this, make it a Zoom call or a Microsoft Teams or whatever system, or a GoToMeeting, whatever system you're using where you may have visual access, or a phone call, is better than simply sending emails back and forth going, yeah, I'm good. Email is not the same personal touch. It doesn't have the same kind of an organic feel to it as the personal conversation and visual. So try to schedule that. If you know that you are living alone, particularly during physical distancing, or you know others who maybe don't have contact and they're isolating more, make that contact a little more frequent. Some people tend to be more sensitive to the isolation, to not having physical contact with others. Make that call. You can be the one to initiate it, but if you know there are others who are working alone, make it a point of checking in more frequently. And that's just about psychological health and taking care of each other. But it's also about making sure the work gets done. In our normal working day, we do tend to informally check in with each other talk to others on the team, bounce things off of each other. Set up a time where you can do that. So as a closing on this, be aware of your early symptoms. Where do you have your aches, your pains? Everybody's different. We will all have different parts of our body that may be more at risk, partly because of how we're set up, partly because of how we work, partly because of who we are. Our number one predictor of the next injury is actually your last injury. So pay attention to your early signs and symptoms. Make sure that you actually change something if you have them. Do the best you can, whether you have symptoms or not, to try to make your workstation fit you physically, and configure your lifestyle for balance. If you've tried to make some changes and it's just not working, those symptoms are persisting, or it's getting worse, or if you're simply going, I don't know what to do, I can't get it there, ask for help. There is help available to you. So that's the main story. There is a final poll question around, what can you do to, similar question to you had before, can you set up your home office to manage your risk of MSI with your current equipment? So I asked you that earlier. Now that we've talked it through, how confident are you that you might be able to actually do something with the current equipment that you have, or with a small investment perhaps in a keyboard? And that poll is open now. And it's still fair game to say, I don't know, I might need a hand. And the poll, oh, we've had a switch. We now have 63% say yes. All right, good. That's a good sign. That means we've had some positive benefit in talking through some of the options. We still have 23% of people who aren't feeling confident they can get there. If you try it, try the best you can, and if you need a hand, ask for help. There are people that can give you a hand there. And with that, I believe we are set up to take some questions. I think Sharon's going to moderate this. Let's pull up to the first slide. There we go.
Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Hi, sorry, I had a few internet problems there. Are you ready for a couple questions, or?
I'm ready for a couple of questions.
Okay, so really good question I had received was, what would you recommend for a workstation configuration when you're taking notes by hand while in front of your computer?
Right. Yeah. Now that can be a bit of a challenge. There's only so much space on the desk in front of it. So ideally on this one, that there are a couple of questions on this, and there's always questions that go with questions, right? The question will be, how long are you going to be taking notes? But if you're in front of your computer and you're going to be writing a lot of notes, you want to tuck yourself in nice and close and put the paper that you're writing notes on close to your mouse. If you're right-handed and your mouse is on the right, put it on the right side. If you're left-handed, actually, you might have a little easier time of it. You can put it just to the left of your keyboard. You have a right hand on the mouse and a left hand on the handwriting, but you want that nice and close. If you're handwriting a lot, you may even want to, and you're not going to be using your mouse, you might even want to put your mouse out of the way and put your paper where your mouse previously was. So it's also, depending on what you're doing in the moment, it's fair game to move your equipment around. If you're going to be handwriting for a while, move your keyboard and mouse out of the way and handwrite. Write your notes.
Thank you. How prevalent are MSIs in offices in comparison to workers in trades?
Surprisingly, there's a perception that it's just office work. How bad can that be? People can't get injured in an office. It's just a keyboard. MSI in an office are as frequent, and in some cases more frequent, than what we would see in heavy manual labor. What tends to happen are slightly different injuries, and we have slightly different risk factors. So what happens in most trades and heavy industry, there's a little more variety in what you do, and there's more movement. So it tends to be more of the manual materials handling kinds of activities and high force issues. With MSI in an office workspace, what we have are static postures that we put ourselves into for hours and hours and hours a day, and we do it every day. And so very small deviations from the target zones of neutral posture over time can add up to be a problem. So the tendinitis, the nerve entrapment kinds of things, and low back is also an issue in offices. About 80% of us are going to experience low back issues at some point in time. Sitting, did not talk a lot about low back issues, but sitting is a static, awkward posture for your back, and that's one of the reasons we want to get up and move once an hour, and that's partly about resetting and allowing the nutrients to get back into tissues in the low back. So that was a long answer. The short answer is they're very similar, and in some cases even greater prevalence in office environments as they are in trades.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Some federal public service employers are training just lay people, colleagues, to conduct ergonomic assessments in the workplace versus using professionals, which was once the practice. Do you have any thoughts on the benefits and the weaknesses of that approach, and when do you think it's appropriate to request a professional ergonomic assessment versus the colleague assessment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the benefits are that there are very few of us that are actual professional ergonomists in Canada. And so access to a professional ergonomist usually has a delay. There's a time lag, and there's a cost. So the benefit is that if you have people who have some basic training, even as simple as the people that have listened to this today, we have an increased number of people who believe they can set themselves up. That also means that if they talk to someone who hasn't had this kind of training, what we just had over the course of 45, 50 minutes, you are actually able to help people that would not otherwise know some of the tricks to set themselves up. And so the more people that are willing to step in and to assist others, the better. I think that's a positive thing. Having people that have a slightly higher level of so the internal ergonomics assessors, who are people who've maybe had half a day or a day's worth of training, is a good thing. They're going to be able to assist you on preventive things, and maybe as a first go for someone who has symptoms or who has an injury. However, if that doesn't work, or if the injury and the symptoms are severe, that's when it pays to bring in a professional, someone who has a little more background on the physiology of the injury, will understand what the injury entails and how the tissue works, and sometimes some more extreme or alternate approaches to the setup. The neutral postures that we talk about today and the basic setup, that works for most people, but for some people that have specific injuries, there are other things that need to be done, and unless you are aware of that, you're probably not going to be able to get there. So bring the professional in if you've tried the other resources and it's not working, or if the injury is a severe, persistent kind of a scenario.
Thank you so much, Dan. That actually brings us to the end of our time today, unfortunately. I want to thank all of the participants for spending some time with us today. I want to thank the Regional Education Officer, Deanna, who is the woman behind the curtain for us. She's been organizing a lot of this behind the scenes, so thank you. And of course, thank you very much, Dan, for providing this information. This webinar has been recorded, and we will absolutely share it. And this information is going to be a huge benefit to our members. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for organizing.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.